There is a physical sensation that occurs when you are about to say no to someone. It is not just a polite hesitation. It is a sudden, cold constriction in your throat, a racing pulse, and a heavy weight settling in the pit of your stomach. To the outside world, you are simply deciding whether to help a coworker, attend a family event, or agree to a minor request. But inside your body, the alarm systems are firing as if you are standing at the edge of a cliff. You override your own comfort, smile and say yes, and though the other person is pleased, something inside you quietly deflates, feeling once again invisible, exhausted, and profoundly alone. If this is familiar, if you recognize that immediate, gut-wrenching dread at the thought of setting a boundary, what you are experiencing is not a lack of confidence or a simple personality trait. It is a lifetime echo. It is the biological footprint of a survival strategy developed decades ago. According to Dr. Gabor Maté's extensive clinical research on developmental trauma, childhood is not something we simply grow out of. The emotional atmosphere of our earliest years becomes the physical architecture of our adult bodies, brains, and personalities. And when we experience early chronic stress, our nervous system constructs invisible patterns of self-protection that we carry across a lifetime, mistaking them for who we are. This is the silent reality of childhood trauma. It is not just the presence of terrible events. It is often the absence of the safe, attuned connection we needed to grow. And until we learn to decode the language of our own nervous system, we will spend our entire lives running from a past we don't even remember. For generations, society has viewed our psychological and physical struggles through a fragmented lens. We treat depression as a chemical imbalance, chronic illness as a genetic misfortune, and relationship self-sabotage as a moral failing. We ask ourselves and each other, what is wrong with you? But Gabor Maté's trauma-informed work consistently redirects our attention to a far deeper, more compassionate question. What happened to you? To understand how childhood trauma shapes a lifetime, we must first look at the developing brain of a child. Unlike other mammals, human infants are born completely helpless and psychologically unformed. A child's brain requires interpersonal connection to physically grow its neural pathways. Our earliest relationships with our primary caregivers act as a biological template. If those caregivers are stressed, distracted, emotionally unavailable, or volatile, the child's developing nervous system is forced to adapt. As Gabor Maté explains, a child has two fundamental, non-negotiable biological needs: attachment and authenticity. Attachment is our connection to others. It is our survival. We must be loved and cared for by our parents, or we die. Authenticity is our connection to ourselves. It is our ability to feel our feelings, know our boundaries, and express our true nature. But when a child's authenticity threatens their attachment, when expressing anger, showing sadness, or having needs results in their caregivers withdrawing, punishing, or becoming overwhelmed, the child cannot choose authenticity. The child must survive. Therefore, attachment always wins. The child learns to suppress their true self, their anger, their needs, and their boundaries to maintain the vital connection to their parents. The tragedy is that this suppression is not a conscious choice. It is a biological adaptation. The nervous system wires this suppression directly into its default programming, and these early adaptations do not disappear when we turn 18. They follow us into our careers, our friendships, our marriages, and eventually our physical health. Let us look at 3 profound, lifelong patterns that stem from these early adaptations. And the third pattern is the deepest, most invisible way that childhood trauma lives on in our bodies. The first pattern of a lifetime shaped by early trauma is the development of the hyperindependent self. In adulthood, you are the person who never asks for help. You pride yourself on your strength, your competence, and your ability to figure everything out on your own. When you face immense stress, financial difficulty, or emotional despair, you withdraw. You pull inward, isolating yourself behind a wall of self-reliance. If someone offers you support, you feel an immediate, deeply uncomfortable sense of vulnerability, almost as if accepting help is a sign of weakness or a dangerous trap. You tell yourself that you just prefer doing things yourself. You believe that you are simply highly capable. But here is what most people miss. According to trauma-informed psychology, extreme hyperindependence is not a strength. It is a coping mechanism. It is the adult manifestation of a child who learned, very early on, that the adults in their life could not be relied upon. Perhaps your parents were physically absent, wrapped up in their own struggles, or emotionally chaotic. Perhaps every time you reached out for comfort, you were met with coldness, anger, or empty promises. Your young nervous system made a logical and brilliant adaptation. If I rely on others, I will be hurt or disappointed. Therefore, I must rely only on myself. You wired your brain to treat vulnerability as a threat and isolation as safety. Now, as an adult, you carry the heavy weight of the world on your shoulders, constantly exhausted, yet unable to let anyone in. This doesn't mean you're broken. It means your mind learned to protect you. That intense desire to do everything alone, that is not a personality trait. That is intelligence in service of survival. But the cost of this survival is a lifetime of profound loneliness, where you are surrounded by people but completely untouched by genuine support. And this is where the survival strategies of childhood become even more complex. Because the next pattern does not just live in your mind or your relationship choices, it begins to dictate the physical reality of your health. The second pattern is when the body begins to manifest the emotions the mind was forced to suppress. You are someone who struggles with chronic physical symptoms. Perhaps you have been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, severe migraines, or persistent digestive issues. You have visited countless doctors, undergone dozens of tests, and tried endless diets and treatments, yet the root cause of your physical suffering remains a mystery. Often you notice that your flare-ups occur during or immediately after periods of intense emotional stress, yet you struggle to connect the two. From a trauma-informed perspective, the dividing line between the mind and the body is a myth. They are part of one single interconnected system. According to Dr. Gabor Maté's groundbreaking work on psychoneuroimmunology, when a child is forced to suppress their natural emotions, especially anger, to preserve attachment, they don't actually get rid of the stress. They simply drive it underground. When you cannot express a healthy no to the world, your body is forced to express that no for you. When a child suppresses their anger, their nervous system remains in a chronic low-grade state of fight or flight. This means their body is constantly flooded with inflammatory stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Over decades, this chronic physiological activation wears down the immune system, disrupts gut health, and promotes systemic inflammation. Eventually, the immune system becomes confused. Unable to attack the external sources of stress, it turns inward and begins to attack the self. The body remembers what the mind was forced to forget. Your chronic illness or physical pain is not a random malfunction of your biology. It is the physical manifestation of decades of unshed tears, unexpressed anger, and unstated boundaries. Not because something was wrong with you, because something was wrong with what happened to you. The physical pain you carry is your body's desperate, intelligent attempt to get your attention, to force you to stop sacrificing your authenticity for the sake of others. But as profound as the physical toll of trauma is, there is a third pattern that runs even deeper. It is the most invisible, persistent, and devastating way that childhood trauma shapes a lifetime. The third pattern, the one that lives in the quietest corners of your mind, is the chronic rejection of your own self. You live with an internal voice that is relentlessly critical. No matter how much you achieve, how kind you are, or how hard you try, you feel a deep, pervasive sense of unworthiness. You feel like an imposter in your own life. You are consumed by shame, a quiet whisper that tells you that if people truly knew you, they would leave. You struggle to look at yourself in the mirror with genuine kindness. When you make a mistake, you punish yourself with hours of mental flagellation. You have become your own most brutal judge. According to Gabor Maté, this internal self-rejection is the ultimate victory of early childhood trauma. When a child is treated with coldness, neglect, criticism, or unpredictability, they cannot blame their parents. To a child, a parent is a god. If a child admits that their parents are unsafe or unloving, their entire world collapses into terror. So, to preserve their sense of safety, the child's mind makes a desperate, unconscious calculation. My parents are not bad. I am bad. If I am bad, then I can change, I can be better, and I can earn their love. The child internalizes the criticism and neglect they receive. They create an inner critic, a harsh, punishing voice to keep themselves in line, hoping that if they are perfect, quiet, and good, they will finally be safe. Over a lifetime, this internalized survival mechanism becomes your daily identity. You become the very person who abandons you. You treat yourself with the same neglect, high standards, and lack of compassion that you experienced as a child. That brutal inner voice, that is not truth. That is not your actual personality. That is your childhood survival system, still running in the background, trying to keep you small and perfect, so that you will never have to face the terrifying pain of rejection again. That is not weakness. That is intelligence in service of survival. But the cost of this adaptation is that you spend your entire life living as a stranger to yourself, constantly fighting an internal war that can never be won. You are not broken, you are not genetically defective, and you are not destined to be unhappy. You adapted. You survived an environment that did not have the capacity to see you, hold you, or validate your true self. Your hyperindependence, your chronic physical symptoms, and your deep self-rejection are not evidence of your failure. They are the living monuments to your resilience. They are proof of how hard your young body and mind fought to keep you alive when you had no other choices. According to Dr. Maté, the path to healing is not about fixing a broken machine. It is about a gentle reclamation. It is about moving from self-judgment to compassionate curiosity. It is about looking at your physical pain, your anxiety, and your hyperindependence, and asking with deep tenderness, when did I learn that this was the only way to be safe? When you begin to understand the story behind your symptoms, the internal war begins to soften. You stop trying to hate yourself into a better version of yourself. You realize that you cannot heal a wound by attacking it. Instead, you begin to offer yourself the very things you were denied: attunement, patience, and unconditional presence. This healing is not a sudden, dramatic event. It does not happen through a single realization or a quick technique. It is the slow, deliberate work of a lifetime. It happens in the quiet, microscopic moments of your daily existence. It is the moment you feel the tightness in your chest, and instead of ignoring it or pushing through, you stop, place a hand on your heart, and take a deep breath. It is the moment you feel the terror of saying no, and you say it anyway, allowing yourself to feel the guilt without letting it control you. It is the moment you make a mistake, and instead of letting your inner critic scream at you, you speak to yourself as you would to a hurt child. With every small act of self-compassion, you are rewriting your biological history. You are showing your nervous system that the danger has passed. You are teaching your body that it no longer has to fight, freeze, or fawn to survive. The same nervous system that adapted to trauma has the biological capacity to adapt to safety. The brain can heal, the immune system can settle, and the soul can return to its natural state of authenticity. You do not have to carry the weight of your childhood survival strategies forever. The war is over. You survived. And now, you are finally allowed to come home to yourself. Which of these 3 lifelong patterns felt like it was speaking directly to your own experience? If conversations like this feel valuable to you, consider subscribing. This channel is dedicated to exploring the deep, somatic and psychological truths that help us move past survival and into genuine healing. Self-understanding will not change your past, but it will change how your past lives inside you today. And that is where your freedom begins. The deepest tragedy of early trauma is that we blame ourselves for the very patterns we had to create just to survive. If this message resonated with you today, which of these lifetime patterns have you been carrying, and what is one gentle way you can offer yourself compassion today? The cost of survival. How trauma shapes you, your body remembers. How does childhood trauma affect us across an entire lifespan? In this deeply compassionate video inspired by the psychological work of Dr. Gabor Maté, we explore how early emotional stress, neglect, and chronic tension shape our adult lives, minds, and bodies. Discover the biological conflict between attachment and authenticity, and how children are forced to suppress their true selves to survive. We break down 3 lifelong patterns of trauma: extreme hyperindependence, physical illness and autoimmune flare-ups, and chronic self-rejection. Learn why these patterns are not character flaws or genetic malfunctions, but intelligent somatic adaptations to early environments. This video offers a path of healing through self-compassion, somatic awareness, and nervous system recalibration. Keywords: Gabor Maté, childhood trauma, trauma healing, somatic psychology, hyperindependence, chronic illness stress, nervous system regulation, mental health, emotional repression, self-compassion, child development.